going to be blamed for destroying low Earth orbit with all of his CubeSats. He's putting 42,000 CubeSats into space. And that these CubeSats are there for what? Meme proliferation. So he can spread his hate speech. So you can kind of see the problem here. And I said, yeah, we're going to see an uptick in space junk from Musk, etc. Well, look at this. FAA halts flights after Elon Musk's Starship rocket explodes and rains down debris. Like, this is a recurring story now. Yeah, Musk, well, he's not president and a literalist, but he is the fourth branch of government now, apparently. NASA astronauts left in space for 9 months. Name and shame who's blamed for leaving them stranded. And Musk wants to bring them down. This is posted by Violet McVeigh. There's a movie coming out on March 21st, so in a couple weeks. Comes out March 21st. So McVeigh, again, he was executed. How old was McVeigh when he was executed? Slips my mind for some reason. Same age that Dave Koresh was when he was incinerated. Same age of the guy with the USA shirt who set himself on fire at the ellipse in front of the White House 33 years after a 33-year-old did it in 1986. Oh, that's right. McVeigh was 33. Same age that Martin Luther was when he nailed the 95 Theses to the door. Same age as Jesus. Same age as Charles Manson. This number. The QAnon shaman was 33 when he ran to the Capitol with a spear and caused the insurrection. Like, I've been saying for some time, we need to quarantine the 33-year-olds, just lock them up for the good of society and for their own good. Okay, continuing here. This might have some significance. Somebody pointed this out to me because of the connection with the Odyssey. So, okay, Space Odyssey 2001, Stanley Kubrick has a lot of predictive programming for right now, for 9/11, for 2020, and for the advent of the iPhone, the smartphone, the ubiquitous black cube, the black monolith, the slate, the monolithic worldview as censored and curated by your handheld devices, controllers. So we've been talking about Space Odyssey for some time and how that movie tells the story of man entering the space age, and the symbol of the sun and the moon and the eclipse over the monolith. I think this represents the solar and the lunar, represent the news and the fiction, the dreams and reality merging into one, which is what we have seen with the PSYOP entertainment complex for decade after decade since. That's been its primary purpose. So this Odyssey thing is significant for that reason. But when these two astronauts, the ones who are stranded, went up to space, they went in the Calypso. And at the time, before it even launched, I was predicting here, there's going to be an incident with this whole launch because it's a Boeing thing. And there was all kinds of talk ever since Leave the World Behind about Boeing and Boeing disasters and Boeing plane parts falling from the sky, Boeing tail cone falling into a parking lot of a Catholic school. Everything was Boeing. And then I watch Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum, by the way, says F you flat earthers. He was pretty crude about it. He has no patience. Channing Tatum. So he's in this movie, Fly Me to the Moon. He has a message for all flat earthers. I'm going to play this. And in the movie, they reference fiery disasters and Boeing in the same sentence several times. So you've got Fly Me to the Moon, Boeing disasters. So before this thing even launched, I said there's going to be a disaster. Well, what do you know? The Calypso keeps them stranded. And Calypso is the name of the nymph who keeps Odysseus stranded.
What?
So here you have the astronauts stranded, Calypso, they're on their space odyssey. So now we're kind of wondering, well, what's next? And as we're looking at this developing story, after Odysseus escapes the island, he confronts the Cyclops. he blinds the Cyclops. The Cyclops has its eye impaled on a stick. And then he prays, he appeals to his father Poseidon for revenge. So Poseidon has some connotations here because of the Kraken, Godzilla, metaphor for the nuke, beast from the sea, hunt for Red October, a ton of symbolism for Seattle getting nuked. Combined with this, I would say even James Cameron's work with the Challenger in the Abyss on 9/11 and the significance of that to the idea of the waterborne Poseidon nuclear torpedo that could take out a coastal town. So there's that. But then, so the Space Odyssey, there's kind of a story here. Then we find out that Christopher Nolan, who did Oppenheimer, the nuke, is now working on what? The Odyssey. Matt Damon's in it. Don't know if that means anything. But the big picture here is there's a metascript significance to the theme in the Odyssey, and it's playing out right now in space. But let me go ahead and play this clip. What is the GOAT conspiracy theory? And this
conspiracy theory.
Flat Earth. I mean, it's like, what? The
Flat
Have you ever been on a plane?
Flat Earth is wild.
What is going on, guys?
Flat Earth is wild.
So stupid. I'm sorry. For you flat earthers out there, go f yourself.
Okay. Now, I don't know why it's uniquely reviled. If you look at the stuff that normies believe, but whatever. You shouldn't even believe the earth is flat any more than you should believe it's whatever. You should know. And if you know something, how do you know? Have you even asked yourself, well, how do I know this is true? Well, easy. We know man went to the moon because the astronauts gave moon rocks to the government of Holland. Oh, wait, those moon rocks were all petrified wood. We know they went to the moon because I saw it on TV. Wait, no, it wasn't broadcast live. Okay, phones are open. I think someone's just calling in. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey Tim, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up? What top?
I just saw.
Yeah,
I just saw the Channing Tatum clip. It's funny. I think the reason why they're so dismissive and there's so much mockery and hatred around even just the notion of it is because of how it's the idea attacks so many apocalypse scenarios. The asteroid. Like same thing with the people who question nukes. I remember when Oppenheimer had come out, all over Twitter, X at the time, people were saying, there are people who don't think nukes are real? What? Whoa.
Yeah, exactly. People were blown away by it. And I say this as a former NBC NCO. I held that slot, and NBC is all about nukes, fallout. And unit readiness in case somebody gets nuked nearby and you got to deal with fallout and plot its course and prepare for EMP. And yeah, looking back, yeah, I totally disbelieve in nukes. I think it's a God construct, 100%. And it's a war God. It's a doomsday scenario that atheists believe in. And that's the main thing. This new paradigm has to terrorize atheists the way that religions can terrorize believers. Because this is, in fact, a de facto religion, but it's just dressed up in a certain way.
Well, I mean, for me, what confuses me is like, even if I totally believed in the nuke and I hear someone, they don't believe in nukes, you might have that knee-jerk reaction. But after a while, don't you start to go, why would they question the, right? Like, what led them to that conclusion, right? And no one ever does that. Instead, like the Channing Tatum clip, it's just like, flat is wild, right? Not believing this is crazy. Whoa. Like, oh, yeah. Anyway, like just moving on, like pretending it never happened. Like just that hand wave dismiss, right?
Yeah, it's certainly true. There is this hand wave dismissal. There's a false sense of superiority that they have in their views. And as I said before, when it comes to the McToon, Patrick Duffy, or Jaron, I don't care about their opinions because they believe the fake news. And if they believe the fake news is real, then what do I care about their big picture perspectives? Because, as I said earlier, I don't think the ball constitutes a complete model until we can discern what's behind space fakery. Space being fake changes everything.
Well, the thing is, also earlier you were talking about like 33-year-olds. I think it's very concerning that there's a new Timothy McVeigh film coming out, right? Especially since he was executed on 6/11, 33 years old. David Crash, 33 years old. And, the thing is, kind of like how you just coined the term meta script. I always have been fascinated in the world religions, like all of them, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Quran to the Bible to, especially in America. America has a wealth of these strange Christian offshoots, and I'm always fascinated in them. And what I found is in the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and the Catholics, what they all do, what's characteristic, is they take one part of the Bible and completely divorce it from its context and form a whole unique doctrine around it. So the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate their birthday. The reason for this is no one in the Bible is seen celebrating the birthday of Jesus, the apostles, all of them, except for two characters, two evil men, the Pharaoh in Joseph's day, and King Herod, who had, John the Baptist beheaded. And on their birthdays, the only two birthdays celebrated in the Bible, they had a man executed. The Pharaoh in Joseph's day, he had the butler hung, and then in King Herod's day, he had John the Baptist beheaded on his birthday. And they say, you see, the only people who celebrate their birthdays are evil men in the Bible, so we don't celebrate birthdays. But in context, if you look at it, there is a much greater, deeper typological significance to those scenes, right? Mormons, they take one verse from the Apostle Paul where it says, we baptize in the name of, for the dead, for who will suffer the baptism for the dead. That's why they do retroactive baptisms for the dead. But if you just read one or two verses above, it has nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like an odd thing to say that they didn't do this in the Bible, therefore. They didn't have tea time in the Bible. So are we supposed to say it's unbiblical? Like, you can't, the Bible was not a complete model because it was maybe up to that point. But I mean, if you take the Bible, maybe it describes the world at a certain point, but no, it does not prescribe a perfect way of life for all time. It's kind of absurd to say that we should judge everything by the standard. It's a closed system if you use it like that. And when I say the Earth question should be open system versus closed system, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is it a closed system that presupposes that it has all the answers, or is it open to new information?
Yeah, and it certainly, you'd be, like so many others throughout history, it'd be abusing the Bible to say like, if it doesn't, I think, what was it? Who was the person who was a biblical flat earther? I hate the biblical flat earth stuff. Total nonsense. I mean,
Philip Stalling.
In the final experiment was a pastor.
Yeah, Philip Stalling. No, I mean Patrick Duff, Patrick Fuddy, Pastor Fuddy.
I think I like how in South Pole you had him just be like the devil and be like it'd be either or. Like either the earth is a ball and Satan is right, or the Bible. And it's like, oh my God. It is really sad how it's reduced in that way. But in the same way, all these cults or different views, they take one part of the Bible and view it. Occultists tend to do that. They always take one thing out of the Bible. Even Bible flat earthers, by the way, they take parts of the Bible and say, like, you see, this is proof that the Bible is flat, when that's not even the focus or the emphasis of the entire passage. There's this unique idea that Jesus was crucified when he was 33 years old. That's not the case according to anything in the Bible. In fact, from the Old Testament prophecies to the Gospels to the epistles, there's no mention of the age of the Son of God when he suffered on the cross. So I was like, well, why do people make such a big deal about Jesus being right? No, I shouldn't say people, occultists in particular. Why do they make such a big deal about the 33, right? It's in their psyops. All of it, what is it? The Freemasonry has an honorary 33rd degree. They claim it's from the 33 vertebrae in the human spine. Like, there's just 33s everywhere, right? Half of 66 too, by the way. So, what I'd always found out is that, Jesus' age is not mentioned in the Bible, but you can derive, if you really read between the lines, that Jesus was baptized when he was 30 years old, and his ministry is 3.5 years, measured by the number of Passovers recorded in the gospel. But there's a problem, Tim. It's like, what happens if Jesus, when he was baptized, is about 30 years old?
Well, I think it's
what if
lower.
He was baptized when he was 3?
It's like for example, America founded 1776. But according to the Masonic calendar, which begins Anno Lucius, year of light, you add 4,000 years, it would have been 5776, which happens to be the height of the pyramid represented on the bill, the Great Pyramid, in inches. But they correlate this also with 1776 AL, which is the year, according to this lore, after the flood. They calculate it in some way. They say this is when the Tower of Babel's construction began. So you can find this correlation between the beginning of the construction of the Tower of Babel, America, the Great Pyramid, and the One World Trade Tower, which looks like a pyramid with a capstone when you look at it from up close, and it's 1776 feet high. So it seems like there's some lore that takes precedent over what might be actual fact. Like, was Martin Luther really 33 when he nailed the theses to the door? I don't know. But that's kind of the lore. That's what goes into it. And these stories are consistent. Dave Koresh thought he was Jesus. His followers thought he was Jesus. He said his death, he would come back and they would fight the apocalypse with these like super bodies that would be brought back to life with more power. And anyway, he was 33. So this is like a common theme. So then for McVeigh, who was radicalized at the Branch Davidian compound, to die at 33 also has some obvious implications here, because he's kind of like this martyr for this group. So it ties into this martyr theme in a lot of ways. But yeah, it doesn't have to be true for them to use it like it's true. It's like this lore, this framework that they impose.
Yeah, and it's like what it is I think the numbers are like the I would say spider webs of lies, how they link together on the if you imagine the world stage audience as a mass mind, the subconscious of it is in numbers. And by decorating history, events, faked events, completely faked events, real events that occurred, fake events, right, with this numerology, whether you believe it's real or not, subconsciously it's always associated. So I think that it's not a mistake. It's like I used to think that they were just joking around, like a little inside joke, or maybe even you suggest the idea it's intercommunication, right? Certainly that could be a part of it, but I really think there is some kind of subconscious mesmerism involved in always seeing these numbers, so that you always associate some kind of savior or some kind of fraudster or someone that was hated, loved with 33. Right? Timothy McVeigh certainly wasn't loved, but by some far right-wing people he was.
The QAnon Trump, yeah,
thing, right?
There is something here. Like the major instigators. And so one of the meanings I've derived from it is from the 33rd degree order out of chaos, meaning every time they create chaos in order to advance increased amounts of order and they reframe things, that number is consistently applied. So there's further meaning to be derived from this if you look at the symbol of the phoenix and how the phoenix symbol relates to the symbol of the Burning Man, and how, like I talked about earlier, the 33-year-old Burning Man on the ellipse, 33 years later, another Burning Man on the ellipse, that every year at the ellipse, at the what they call Catharsis at the Mall, they do a Burning Man festival. There were 33 consecutive Burning Man festivals, Black Rock City, Nevada, and then they had to break for a year because of COVID. So what is the correlation here, I think, has to do with the idea of, and it's esoteric, there's many meanings. I think it's state change, ascension, like, for example, and without going into too many rabbit trails here trying to determine what it means, I think it can be said that the number 33 has a meaning of the phoenix and revolution. Revolution specifically.
Order out of chaos. Yeah.
Burn down, build back later. Yeah.
Build back better. Right? So it's like destruction and then build back better. And that 33 is significant because the Trinity, the first was a nuclear test site in New Mexico, right? Was called the Trinity test site. Also, Oppenheimer brought that back to our memory with in the film. So this is significant. 33, Trinity, all of these things. But what I discovered in my own research is that there's compelling evidence. I don't know if anyone here is aware, but the Gregorian calendar was created like 1,500 years after Christ, and it was designed by a Jesuit mathematician. And if you follow, because the calendar system didn't exist in the days of that are purported in the Bible. If you work backward using the constellations described in Revelation chapter 12 and the Levitical priest and the feasthoods and stuff, you can find, and this has been proposed since the 1970s, that the actual birth of Jesus was September 11th, 3 BC. And it's like, that's, whoa, a little bit strange. And if you know that to be the actual birth of Jesus and count the Passovers, the Son of God, like Jesus, was actually crucified when he was 34 years old.
Wait.
So
Let me
3
ask
plus
this:
4 equals
If
7.
wasn't Neo born on 9/11?
That was when his passport was expired, right? Like in
Oh wait, that's right. His birth date was 3/11, and his passport expired 9/11. Somebody here says 33 degrees is one above freezing. Yeah, I also look at it like this when it comes to the significance of transcendence. Is like you have an ice cube symbolizing the material, and then 33 is the temperature where it begins to melt. It breaks to that form. So it's like transcendence of this realm. And if you look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, they have the black, the kingdom is associated with black, and at the top is the light, and it has this map of the soul's ascension. And many correlate this with the idea of the kundalini, the spine, and all this stuff. So you have this new age version of Christ that represents the person transcending the material realm. But it's extra biblical, and I think you make that point pretty well.
Yeah, and it's like, so yes, the world stage Jesus was crucified at 33 years old, but the biblical Jesus was not. And this is the studying the differences, like when we do predictive programming analysis or media analysis, when our metascriptors adopt books or films, we like to see, well, why did they change it? And the release date of the film, what did they change from the original source material to make it syncretize with the current cultural moment in time, right? And the 33 Jesus, if you will, the world stage Jesus, being tied to the Phoenix or destruction and resurrection, the Trinity site being where the first nuke is. In the Vatican, behind the Pope, there's the statue of Fazzini, which was made in the 70s, where it has a nuclear cloud, Jesus arising out of a nuclear crater. That's seated behind the Pope. Very strange. Like, I do wonder if the fake nuke that we might see in the future could be the catalyst to consolidate all of the different denominations in America, to syncretize them to like this ultimate, if you will, world stage Jesus that's coming about. That's just a theory. I don't have a lot of evidence behind it, but Trump is certainly, there's 33s around him. So wasn't he convicted guilty of 34? He was convicted of 34.
Look, in my opinion, I think because of our think tank that we have seen some world script rewrites, I think they've bumped some 42s to 43 and some 33s to 34. I said 34 is the new 33, and I think they have done this deliberately. Hey, I got a pop quiz for you. In the 2023 film Oppenheimer, there was a plot device where Los Alamos scientists gradually added marbles into a fishbowl, and these represented uranium and plutonium. Now, how many pounds of marbles did they need in order to complete it?
33, I think.
That's correct. In the middle of the movie, this plot device here, the scientists had to put 33 pounds of marbles into the fishbowl.
Yeah, and it's just it's almost like one of those in a bingo card, like a bingo free spot. When you see 33, 33 and stuff in any of these news events, you can even, well, by the way, the age of that late December, there was a story of I think a South American immigrant, a Mexican immigrant who had burned a woman to death, set her on fire. How old do you think that man was?
Oh God! Yeah, they should have quarantined him for his 33rd year.
Always quarantine with 33-year-olds, right? And it's always, it's not like everyone's always reading between the lines, but these headlines are flashing across everyone. And I think what our metascriptors, when they're working on these things, they consider the mass mind, like the entire world stage audience as one big brain. They won't get everyone all the time, but it's still these impressions are being made always. And no one consciously looks at the age of these perpetrators, right? Like the think tank does, where people are, what's it called, completely just disseminating all these, staged fake events. It's like you can look at it, but most people, if you don't know that it's staged, you won't even bother looking for numerological symbolism or for themes and things like this.
And let's add this too. Our awareness is a matter of filtering out. So your ego, your perception, everything has to be ordered. And in order for this to be ordered, there has to be a lot of filtration, because we get so much information every single second that if we processed all of it, it would be like being high on acid. So we have to have a narrowing. So our consciousness is mostly a filter, but all that peripheral information that we don't notice is still being noticed. It's just not being noticed by you. It's being noticed by your, I'd just say your wider peripheral awareness and your subconscious takes it all in. So it's all there. It's all programming. All the entertainment is programming, whether you're half-assed paying attention or you're fully engrossed. And so we watch with that awareness in mind. And I got another pop quiz for you. So the brother of Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan, did Fallout, which is about what happens after the nuke. What vault was the protagonist from in Fallout?
Vault 33. Of course.
Yeah. And isn't it wild? It's like the same family. These individuals, they're in these movies that are doing like parallel predictive programming narratives, and even the symbolism lines up consistently.
Yeah, and I think, what is his name? Michael Aquino, in the book Mind War, he had talked about how the secret for he uses actually the magician. He has a chapter on magic, and he talks about, like, if you were a magician, you want him to do a good show, you must have 100% complete control of the stage and the environment of where your trick is occurring, but you don't need to make that obvious. In fact, you shouldn't make that obvious to your audience. So, and the analogy then to the Psy War, Mind War, of trying to stage these things, it's beneficial to think that Hollywood is separate from the news, that don't bother looking into both of the Nolans making shows and movies related to the nuke, and whatever. Don't think about these recurring numbers of, Mel Gibson, for example, in The Patriot, right? Was it 9 and 11, that rocker he was sitting on? That still blows my mind. That's crazy.
Yeah. Mel Gibson, a year before 9/11, he's a patriot building a rocking chair. He's like a veteran, and he's like 9 pounds, 11 ounces. That's perfect. He sits on it, and everybody looks at him like they're scared. The camera focuses in on the rear of the chair. You see the 2 legs, and then it collapses. And then his farmland gets invaded, and he has to go to war. The Patriot, Mel Gibson, conspiracy theory guy, big in Q lore as one of theirs. And then his more recent movie, Flight Risk, had a lot of predictive programming for all the plane crashes that we saw right after that one came out. And then he goes on to Joe Rogan's show as his house is burning, which ties into the LA fires, which were compared to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and delayed the production of Fallout Season 2. So Gibson, again, yeah, the fact that he's part of 9/11 predictive programming tells you he's a world stager. He's in on it.
Yeah, he's a world stager who's trained by the best, because we talked previously about Jesuit theater. He's an honorary graduate of Marymount Loyola Jesuit University. There's a picture of him and stuff. Of course, just because, why not? AutoSat in the chat said something fascinating. It's data compression for the mind, a way of bottlenecking huge chunks of information and filtering it into the most important parts. Absolutely. I mean, in machine learning, that's how it's done. You get a compressed version, an encoded version of data, and then you encode and decode it. But the encoded version is still used. So, yeah, it's like, again, even if it doesn't code your conscious mind, all of these little instances Tim and I are talking about, like, they're still impressed on the world stage audience to add plausibility, to add legitimacy to a faked event where people will be arguing about why it happened, who did it, never about whether or not it actually occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And the theory behind chaos magic and sigil magic, as I think it was Austin Osman Spare came up with this. The idea was that you could take a sentence, and this is all done, of course, in the context of the idea of magic, but you take a sentence of what you want, an expression of your will or your desire, and you take those letters and you mash them up into a symbol where someone looking at it wouldn't be able to discern it. But the theory here is that if you can bypass your conscious interpretation of it, it still gets absorbed into the subconscious, where greater levels of, mental resources can be employed toward achieving and influencing that end. So sigil magic is based on the idea that our subconscious mind is something of a supercomputer that can be tapped into, but that it's not directly under our control. You almost got to trick your ego into ceding control in order for it to work. But it's an interesting idea here. The idea here, of course, that we're highly susceptible to all the information around us, even if we don't know it. Mind viruses, kind of.
For sure. The one thing I was going to say before I go is that, like, I think the biggest draw that I came to this think tank was when I saw the machete clip and the connection to 713. The biggest contribution I think I've ever gotten from you, Tim, is that predictive programming points to fake events. So sigil magic, compressing information and stuff, these things are used to add plausibility. It's like the most subtle form of lying. Like, because, when someone thinks, for example, like the ninth commandment, don't bear false witness, you probably think of telling someone something's false, like a lie. Like, I was there yesterday, right? No, the way Satan lies, or the way occultists lie, or the way these people, the most advanced liars, they would have deep fake photos of them at a place. They would have suggestions. They would have other fake witnesses saying, of course he was there. And so it's far beyond them just saying, I mean, of course I was at the party yesterday. They would go way beyond, attack the subconscious. They have false witnesses, deep fake photos. In fact, you would get to the point where you would never even ask if they were at the place at the time. It would just be an assumed reality.
This false witness thing is interesting. I remember when Google Maps had shown how North Korea was in darkness and South Korea was lit. And this headline went around, this phrase went around. It was like, Google Maps has made witnesses of us all. So Google Maps has made witnesses of us all to this injustice, this state of, I guess, poverty that they were forced into. But now we're all witnesses to it. But the truth of it is, the news media has made false witnesses of us all. And I wonder what that means in terms of the implications for that particular commandment, if just by indoctrination and conditioning, you become a bearer of false witness and you defend it. And that's where I call this the lie world order, and I say there's no honesty or there's no truth in it, because the honest people are co-opted and made into bearers of false witness and media advocates.
For sure. The thing I always say, this aphorism, is a half-truth is a full lie. A half-truth is a full lie. That is all you need to know. Like that, that's really the implications of it. Because sure, maybe the physical locations where a faked event occurs exists. Sure, maybe there were a couple of marks in the audience, like we saw in Vegas. Right? That still doesn't. It's still a complete lie. Right? The full lie. It doesn't matter. Right? That there's some things that are a part of it that might be real. Right? So yeah, just a half truth is a full lie. And yeah, again, the commandments themselves, they're so archaic. Like the fourth commandment, don't have like keep your sheep inside and don't have servants working on the Sabbath. Like that's not. There's so much more to it. It's not a bunch of rules. It's the spiritual implications of it. And false witness. You can bear false witness with a facial expression, with a tone of your voice, with what you don't say. But if you read it very literally, if you're a Bible literalist and just take it as is, then you turn into a Pharisee and you start turning into like, well, I didn't say this, right? It was up to you to infer and stuff. And sure, I was smiling while saying it. So yeah, you get what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely. And I think this is all interesting stuff to talk about. I'm very interested in really going into the weeds with lies and the various categories of lies and how much you can, I guess, claim plausible deniability. Or are we a society of liars, and who's responsible for fixing that? I think these are all valid points, and I agree we shouldn't bear false witness, and I think that we should reach for some level of objectivity, and we should hold to it just as a matter of principle. But no, that's not how things are. And the fact that that's in the commandments just points to how intrinsic of a problem and issue this has always been.
Yeah, and it's the Ten Commandments are split up, like, and a bunch of don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. But Jesus, when he came, he affirmed them, saying, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. The first four are about how to love God, and the last six are about loving your neighbor as yourself. So it's quite, really, if you love someone, you wouldn't be lying to them. And that's why I think you've talked about on the show before, it's like, are our meta-scriptures benevolent? Like, are they even actually bad? Like, of course they are. You can't mix in lies to achieve something good. The ends do not justify the means. This idea that even if the ultimate reality that they're working towards, the ultimate final kingdom, is actually quite comfortable and good, it can't be. It's built upon lies, right?
That's a good point.
I don't care how comfortable it is.
That's a good point. And we also have to keep in mind that the PSYOP entertainment complex, that the operations they roll out, these do constitute psychological abuse, emotional manipulation. And that's a form of control that is subtle, and it's more effective and economical than physical violence. but it actually works to establish the same dynamic. And this is why I say that we have the moral high ground. If somebody says, "How dare you say nobody died?" I'm like, "How dare you bear false witness to terrorize people with lies about people dying that you can't even verify?" So, from that point of view, I think that
Yeah, and it should be good news, right? The stuff you tell, it should be good news, saying like, yeah, that event, no one died, no one cried. It should be a good thing. You don't need to be so invested in hanging on every word Trump and Zelensky say while they're sitting on a couch or something. You don't. This should be good news, but people are so, I would say, bound spiritually, like these spiritual ropes that's tied them into the system.
yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, great call and great points that you raised here. And yeah, we do have to take this the symbolism stuff. We have to look at it objectively as we can, and that's why I make a study of it. And I'm looking at these patterns, but they are not bound to
For sure.
truth when they
Thanks,
write these
Tim.
stories.
All right, bye.
All right, see ya. So we were making this distinction between this New Age Christ figure of transcendence and the biblical concept, and how they're somewhat they're fundamentally different, coming from two different worldviews. But the concept of the phoenix also implies reincarnation. Joe Saunter says, "Are they trying to do Wall-E? What is going on? Are they pretending they ruined the planet?" Oh yeah, they're pretending. And Wall-E has Otto. Otto is like Hell 9000 in control of the ship. So one interpretation of Wall-E is that you're actually looking at the Noah's flood myth, the flood. And during the flood, Noah and the chosen go into the ark until the waters recede. And how do they know that it's possible to go back to land? Well, a dove. A dove goes and grabs an olive branch, and so the olive branch being a symbol of peace. Well, this is now showing that the floods have been retracted. So the dove brings the branch back. I think there was also a raven in the story, but anyway, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning about the Epic of Gilgamesh, which could be the basis for Noah's flood. But anyway, so here's a new iteration of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Noah's flood, Wall-E. The story is Earth is uninhabitable, and the government has declared Directive 113. Directive 113 means that we have to exit, abandon ship. So the human beings go onto a big spaceship, which is like Noah's Ark, but it's Noah's Ark in space. And notice the correlation between the waters and space. Stranded in space, in the movie Breathe, they're stranded underwater. There's a lot of connections here. The idea of aliens above, aliens below. But Wall-E has a space ark. And so they're in space while the robot, Wall-E, is on Earth cleaning up our trash. And one day he's maintaining a plant. So the plant is evidence that life can now resume on Earth. But from the ark, they send down this little robot, this little white robot here. It looks like a dove. And her job is to take this plant and bring it back up to the captain so they can see it's time to go back to the Earth. So this is there's a Noah's Ark. The wickedness in this movie isn't sin, but it's our carbon footprint. It's our pollution. It's capitalism. And the movie creates a great deal of sympathy for the robots. They're great. They're morally pure. And the human beings are decadent, morbidly obese, on recliners, looking at screens and slurping protein shakes all day. They don't get up. They don't even do anything for themselves. And in the way it's portrayed on the ship, it's also Marxist class warfare stuff, because they represent the elite and the robots are the poor. The robots are slaves. The robots have no rights. So now these humans, having been acclimated to this new system where they don't have to do anything, they just sit back and eat and watch TV, and the robots serve all their needs, they have no reason to move. Their muscles atrophy and they balloon up in size. And of course, 0G, it doesn't matter. So at the end of the movie, they come back down to the Earth and they step out of the ship, and Otto was trying to control them. There's some dark implications for Otto, like this Hell 9000 like robot that controls everything. When the president says it's time to abandon the Earth, Directive 113, He puts on a gas mask. All kinds of 311 connections. And in some of the imagery, you can even see what appears to be a 311 encoded into the name Wall-E. I think you have to look at it upside down. But Pixar is known for using the number 113 in many of their movies. This is the first movie where they defined it pretty openly. So they go back down to the earth and they can barely walk. So what they start doing is they decide we're going to abandon our technology and we're going to farm the land. So it goes from capitalism destroys the world to agrarian communist revolution, where they're no longer going to enslave the robots and they're going to till the land with themselves. They're going to abandon the easy life because it destroyed them and it destroyed the planet. So Wall-E is a movie that both appropriates Old Testament mythology with the neo-eschatology of climate change, climate Armageddon, with the critique, the Marxist critique of the West. Then it has the fall of the West, the fall of the world as a result of it, and then the rebuilding on this new basis that there's not going to be an underclass. So again, Disney brainwashing.